Donald J. Trump went from businessman to president in 2016. However, his controversies as president, the illegal Democrat campaign against him, the deep state conspiracies to remove him from office, as well as the proven lies that were continuously perpetuated by the mainstream media, will be covered and disproven, citing published sources and first-hand accounts from those persons who were there. Why was there such a concerted effort to fabricate lies and create a smear campaign against Trump? Why was there so much effort put into the major media outlets to promote falsehoods? Why did the various federal agencies also climb on board to assist in creating these fabrications, to include officials and various former directors committing perjury in sworn testimony to both houses of Congress? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, military veteran, historian, author, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. Donald John Trump was born on June 14, 1946 in Queens, New York. His father was Fred Trump, born in 1905 to German immigrant parents. His mother was born in Scotland in 1912 and immigrated to the U.S. in 1930, becoming a naturalized citizen in 1942. She and Fred had 5 children: Fred Trump Jr., who died in 1981, Mary Ann and Elizabeth, and younger brother Robert. Donald Trump received a Bachelor of Science degree in economics from the University of Pennsylvania in 1968, following which his father named him president of his real estate business in 1971. Trump then renamed it the Trump Organization. Trump never appeared to have any serious interest in national politics and was a registered Democrat and Republican at various times. But his focus was on his own businesses in construction and renovation of skyscrapers, public buildings, hotels, casinos, and golf courses worldwide. But in 2000, Trump ran for the presidential nomination as the Reform Party candidate in the California and Michigan primaries against Republican nominee George W. Bush and the likely Democrat nominee Al Gore, but he withdrew from the race in February of 2000. In February 2011, Trump suggested that he would challenge President Barack Obama in the 2012 general election during his appearance at the Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC, giving speeches in early primary states. The media did not take him seriously, and in May 2011, he announced he would not run, and instead he endorsed Mitt Romney in February of 2012. In June 2015, Trump again announced his candidacy for president against the Democrat frontrunner Hillary Clinton. Once again, his campaign run was not taken seriously by the media or political analysts, but he rapidly climbed above the other Republicans in the national opinion polls. His position of being a political outsider, not owing allegiance to the lobbyists, big corporations, and his announcement that he would fund his own campaign without taking major corporate contributions, in order to not owe anyone anything, struck a chord. Trump outlined all that he saw wrong with the D.C. swamp, to include the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, American businesses going overseas to avoid high tax rates and operating costs, and the promises of bringing corporations and jobs back to the United States resonated with the population. Many blue-collar workers whose livelihoods had been crippled as a result of offshoring their jobs, and Trump pointed out the high cost and financially devastating impact of the Affordable Care Act upon individuals and businesses. Trump also campaigned on rebuilding the military, stopping taxpayer funding for programs that harmed the economy, ending the war on terror, securing the southern border, enforcing immigration laws, rebuilding the military structure in total, and protecting coal, oil, and natural gas jobs, and that saw him become the frontrunner in March 2016. The media had been very friendly to Trump over the decades until his announcement that he would run as a Republican in the 2016 presidential election. After that, they always tried to portray Trump as a business failure, racist, and misogynist. Yet, despite these setbacks, the majority of his businesses continued to thrive in varying degrees, depending upon the national and global economics. Trump also pointed out the fact that NATO was being paid for by the American taxpayer. For decades, NATO countries had failed to pay their 2% GDP dues, yet still expected U.S. protection, and he said that NATO was obsolete. He stated that he wanted to address the U.S.-China relationship and strike down the free trade agreements such as NAFTA and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and get the U.S. out of the Iran nuclear deal, Clean Power Plan, and the Paris Climate Accords, also called the Paris Agreement, which did not pertain to China and India but was targeting Western Europe and the USA. Trump campaigned on modernizing and expediting services for veterans, repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act, abolishing the Common Core education programs, investing in infrastructure, simplifying the tax code while reducing taxes for all economic classes, and imposing tariffs on imports by companies that offshore jobs. Many of those jobs came back. Trump also wanted an extreme vetting process or a complete ban on immigrants from Muslim-majority countries that had ties to terrorism to reduce Islamic terrorism in this country. Due to the policies of Barack Obama and the rise of the ISIS caliphate, he proposed aggressive military action against the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. The media hit Trump hard after he was endorsed by former Ku Klux Klan Imperial Wizard and Grand Dragon David Duke, who agreed with Trump's policies on the border and immigration. Duke stated that he enthusiastically supported Trump and said, he and like-minded people voted for Trump because of his promises to take our country back. Trump was slow to disavow the endorsement from David Duke after he was questioned about it during a CNN interview on February 28, 2016, but he stated that he would not support hate groups. The media never mentioned the fact that his opponent, Hillary Clinton, openly admitted that she, as well as Vice President Joseph Biden, were great friends and were mentored by the former KKK recruiter, segregationist, and open racist Democrat Senator Robert C. Byrd of West Virginia. Trump then hired Steve Bannon, the executive chairman of Breitbart News, in August 2016 as his campaign CEO, and Kellyanne Conway as his campaign manager. The alt-right movement, as it was called by the media, supported Trump for his Make America Great Again platform. Unlike previous candidates, Trump did not release his tax returns, which became standard practice since James Earl Carter released his in 1976. He said his tax returns were being audited and that his lawyers had advised him against releasing them, and there is no law mandating that process. In October 2016, portions of Trump's state filings for 1995 were leaked to a reporter from the New York Times. They show that Trump had declared a loss of $916 million that year, including accounting for depreciation, which allowed him to avoid paying taxes legally for up to 18 years. In a roller coaster political campaign season, Hillary Clinton led Trump in the national polling averages, if they could be believed. But as more of her illegal activities were becoming known, and the fact that she promised to put coal miners out of business and attack the fossil fuel industry, she had lost the lead in early July 2016. That was when Trump selected Indiana Governor Mike Pence as his vice presidential running mate. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton had 3 presidential debates in September and October 2016. During these, Trump twice refused to say whether he would accept the results of the election, stating that he would have to see how it goes, alluding to certain areas that always had problems with voting integrity. Republican Trump won the 2016 presidential election in the Electoral College with 304 to 227 electoral votes, while Democrat Clinton won the popular vote with Trump receiving nearly 2.9 million fewer popular votes than Clinton, making him the 5th person to be elected president while losing the popular vote. The majority of those votes were from New York and California, reinforcing the need for the Electoral College. The loss to Trump was a political shockwave, as the media, the pollsters, and the Democrat establishment had believed their own propaganda and underestimated the power of Trump's message and the desires of working-class Americans. Clinton had made many severe strategic errors, which Trump pounced upon during his campaign and even during the debates. Trump won 30 states, including the energy and industry states Clinton threatened, and had suffered under Obama, such as Michigan, Texas, Kentucky, West Virginia, Wyoming, Oklahoma, South Dakota, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Wisconsin, with some states being considered reliable Democratic strongholds since the 1990s. Trump's message of bringing back jobs, national security, and energy independence were powerful, and the victory also had a Republican-controlled House of Representatives and Senate. His tough-on-crime posture saw him receive the vast majority of support from the various local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies and departments. In order to divest himself of anything connecting him personally to new foreign deals, Trump moved his businesses into a revocable trust run by his sons, Eric and Donald Jr., and one of their business associates. He also took only $1 instead of the six-figure salary as president, donating the money to charities. The media screamed hypocrisy since the Trump Organization expanded business operations in Dubai, Scotland, Saudi Arabia, and the Dominican Republic. Trump's businesses continued to profit, which was not illegal and expected to continue. Trump signed 6 executive orders during his first week in office, which authorized procedures for repealing the Affordable Care Act known as Obamacare, withdrawal of the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations, bailing out of the Iran nuclear deal, the reinstatement of the Mexico City policy that blocked U.S. federal funding for non-governmental organizations that provided abortion counseling or referrals, advocated to decriminalize abortion, or expanded abortion services. He also used his executive power to expand the Keystone XL and Dakota Access Pipeline construction projects, reinforcement of border security, and a plan to design and construct the wall along the U.S. southern border with Mexico. The Democrats had been plotting to remove Trump as a candidate, even during the campaign and then after he became president. Hillary Clinton and Jake Sullivan, in conjunction with Fusion GPS and their friends within the Obama-established Department of Justice, Internal Revenue Service, Central Intelligence Agency, National Security Agency, and Federal Bureau of Investigation, started breaking a lot of laws. Anti-Trump Republicans initially started opposition research against Trump during the 2016 GOP primaries to remove him, the dangerous outsider, but the Clinton campaign and Democratic National Committee took over the operation. Then, more than $1 million flowed from the Clinton campaign and DNC to the law firm Perkins Coie, which then hired the opposition research company Fusion GPS, who hired former British MI6 agent Christopher Steele, who got involved. Hillary Clinton and the DNC had paid Steele an estimated $168,000 to gather information on Trump that could be used as political leverage against him. That became the famous Steele dossier, which was taken by the DOJ and FBI Director James Comey personally, who certified the document as verified to the FISA court to get wiretap and surveillance warrants against the Trump campaign and continue the practice into his presidency. Comey and others in the DOJ even touted the dossier, claiming that without the Steele dossier, there could have never been any request for FISA warrants. All the mainstream media outlets claimed that the proof that Trump colluded with Putin to steal the election, supported by charlatan Democrats such as California Democrat House Representative Adam Schiff, Hillary Clinton, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and others who all knew the truth, yet continued to lie to the American people about the so-called evidence in plain sight. However, after the FBI, through Director James Comey, was caught with their pants down, they offered Steele $1 million if he could verify anything in the document. But only after the 4 perjured submissions to the FISA court came to light and he admitted that he could not verify the data. CNN even had to report that Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, released a declassified FBI document showing The Bureau misled the FISA court 4 times, committing 4 felonies, and Comey also lied to the Senate Intelligence Committee in 2018 about the Steele dossier's primary subsource and, therefore, the reliability of the Steele dossier. To be clear, multiple U.S. government inquiries uncovered dozens of contacts between Trump campaign associates and Russians, which have since been acknowledged, and those were proven to be legitimate business contacts. But CNN, in order to try and save face, stated, "The candidate himself and his closest advisors even welcomed the Kremlin's interference in the election. Still, none of it added up to the collusion suggested in Steele's memos." What they referred to was Trump openly asking Russia to give him Hillary Clinton's 33,000 emails that were under subpoena by Republicans in Congress due to the fact that she violated federal law, including the National Security Act, by having a private server to bypass congressional scrutiny of her nefarious activities. It was also proven that the server had been hacked by Russia, North Korea, and China, and perhaps others. It is also speculated that Iran may have hacked it, thus assisting in the planning in the 2012 Benghazi, Libya attacks on the U.S. diplomatic compound and nearby CIA annex on September 11 through 12, 2012, resulting in the deaths of U.S. Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 other Americans. See our video on Benghazi for more information. Part of Clinton's loss of public support were her actions of destroying the phones and computers to avoid the evidence of her activities coming to light during the campaign, and Trump exposed this to the public during the debates. Even CNN once again had to admit the indictments secured by John Durham, the special counsel appointed during the Trump administration to investigate the FBI's Russia probe. Durham alleges that Steele's primary source, a U.S.-based foreign policy analyst, repeatedly lied to the FBI about where he got his information. The revelation of the criminal fraud perpetrated by Clinton, the DOJ, FBI, and the Democrats on Capitol Hill against Trump becoming public knowledge sent the liberals over the edge. They had won Pulitzer Prizes for their falsified investigative journalism, and many of the Democrats secured high-paying jobs as analysts discussing the great crime of Russia collusion, which were proven to be lies, which they knew to be lies all along. So, as a result, Trump was sued as a result of his businesses still making money for violating the domestic and foreign emoluments clauses of the U.S. Constitution. This was the first time that the clauses had been invoked against a president with any serious determination. One case was dismissed in a lower court, and 2 others were dismissed by the U.S. Supreme Court as moot after the end of Trump's term. There was nothing illegal for a man's companies to conduct business, unlike the Biden crime family, which made over $30 million in foreign profits and never provided a legitimate service. In addition, all of Trump's business bank accounts were long-standing, solid, and verified with federal EIN numbers and a track record of filing tax returns, unlike the Bidens, who hid and laundered their illegal foreign money through 24 shadow limited liability corporations and never declared the illegal income or paid their taxes until Hunter Biden's attorney paid $4 million in delinquent taxes for him. Trump also supported traditional marriage between a man and a woman, but he considered the nationwide legality of same-sex marriage as a settled issue, and no action was warranted. In March 2017, his administration rolled back key parts of the Obama administration's workplace protections, especially transgenders serving in the military. This was considered discrimination against LGBTQ people, but it was upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court. The media that loved Trump before he ran for president turned rabid and totally lost all credibility when they began running fake news stories, creating lies, using unnamed sources to support unsubstantiated allegations, and supporting unwarranted conspiracy theories while creating conspiracies of their own. Also stated by the fake news, during the 2016 campaign, Trump promised to protect funding for Medicare and other social safety net programs, but in January 2020, he suggested he was willing to consider cuts to such programs. What this statement fails to state is that Trump's plan was to ensure that illegal aliens and non-citizens would not have access to legitimate taxpayer-funded programs, thereby reducing costs. Trump also barred organizations that provided abortions or abortion referrals from receiving federal funds, which fell under the Hyde Act, which Biden has supported. He did not believe taxpayers should pay for abortions, which he also believed should be an individual state issue under the 10th Amendment and not a federal issue. Trump was always a staunch supporter of the Second Amendment and did not believe that law-abiding citizens should be punished due to the criminality of others, that all Americans had the right to self-defense. However, Trump was in favor of capital punishment, and his administration, the federal government, executed 13 prisoners, more than in the previous 56 years combined, after a 17-year moratorium. Trump supported the use of enhanced interrogation methods, such as waterboarding, but he encountered serious opposition from Defense Secretary General James Mattis. In December 2017, Trump signed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, which had been passed by both the Republican House and Senate without any Democratic votes. The law reduced tax rates for businesses and individuals, with business tax cuts to be permanent and individual tax cuts set to expire after 2025, and it eliminated the Affordable Care Act tax penalty for those who did not buy it, removing the burdensome individual mandate. The Trump administration claimed that the act would either increase tax revenues or pay for itself by prompting economic growth. Instead, revenues in 2018 were 7.6% lower than projected. But that statement by the liberal media was not exactly true. Yes, it reduced tax income received from the tax mandate, as people were no longer forced to buy the ACA. But the corporate tax cuts started bringing companies back to the nation and allowed companies to hire more workers due to lower operating costs, thereby increasing the taxpayer base. Under the policy, unemployment would be at around 3.6% by July 2019, down from 4.7% when he took office. It would not be until the COVID-19 pandemic unleashed by China that unemployment would start rising again. Trump did not agree completely with the scientific consensus on climate change and the global warming agenda, hence his pulling out of the nonsensical Paris Accord. He reduced the budget for renewable energy research by 40%, preferring to focus upon fossil fuel exploitation, approving leases, creating energy independence, and in the process, he reversed Obama's policies on climate change. This was another reason unemployment dropped and the inflation rates fell to 1.40% by 2020 before the pandemic. In fact, interest rates remained at about 2.4% until the Biden administration, when they rose to 9% and are currently at 7.93%. Rates declined throughout 2019. When January 2020 came around, the average rate for a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage was about 3.7%. Under Biden, the average mortgage interest rate for a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage has been above 6% throughout 2023, soaring above 7% in mid-August. In June 2017, Trump announced the withdrawal of the United States from the Paris Agreement, making the U.S. the only nation in the world to not ratify the agreement, and the Democrats and progressive climate anarchists went berserk. Trump wisely explained that India and China were getting a pass, not forced to adhere to the accord, and increasing their coal-fueled industries, while expecting the rest of the world to nearly halt output and convert to wind and solar power, which would cripple American production and GDP. Trump aimed to boost the production and exports of fossil fuels. Natural gas expanded under Trump, but coal production fell, probably due to less need for coal as natural gas production exploded. But Trump did not kill the coal industry, which is what Hillary Clinton campaigned on doing. Trump also rolled back more than 100 federal environmental regulations under the domain of the EPA, which the progressives claimed would increase greenhouse gas emissions, air and water pollution, and the expanded use of toxic substances. Actually, Trump's energy policy did nothing of the kind, and these assertions were refuted by the fact that the increase in natural gas production, which is clean, never harmed the environment. Air quality continued to increase under Trump, while the progressives still turned a blind eye to China and India. In response to the opioid epidemic, Trump signed a legislation in 2018 to increase funding for drug treatments. But he was widely criticized by the mainstream media for failing to make a concrete strategy. But Obama had not addressed that issue effectively either. U.S. opioid overdose deaths were reduced in 2018 but rose to a record 50,052 deaths in 2019. The progressives also claimed that Trump weakened protections for animals and lowered the environmental standards for federal infrastructure projects, which was not true. They used the same argument to fight him on building the border wall, that it was environmentally unsound. They were appalled that he expanded the permit for drilling and resource extraction, such as allowing drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, also known as the ANWR. In contrast, Joe Biden's expensive China-made windmills have killed more wildlife, such as birds, dolphins, and whales, and done nothing to lower energy costs. By late 2018, the U.S. was exporting oil and gas to Europe, undercutting the same products supplied by Russia at an even better price and with a higher quality product. Domestically, gasoline averaged $2.26 and then down to $1.87 per gallon in most states by 2020, down $1 per gallon under Obama. Under Trump, oil production reached its all-time peak of 12.3 million barrels a day just before the pandemic. In 2022, the highest price under Biden was $5.07 per gallon, which finally fell after he sold the federal oil reserves to China and other nations and released it for domestic consumption, while still begging for oil from Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. Under Trump, the strategic oil reserve was filled at below $21 a barrel. Although the price of crude oil in the United States did fall to less than $25 a barrel during Trump's time in the White House, it still fluctuated up and down, but under Biden, oil surged to over $120 a barrel. The most important part of Trump's energy plan was to successfully reduce the value of foreign crude oil. And when he imposed the oil export sanctions upon Iran, that nation's economy was crippled. The Arab Gulf states were also thrown back on their heels as we no longer needed imports received at previous levels. In June 2018, the Trump administration, along with 18 Republican-led states, argued before the Supreme Court that the elimination of the financial penalties associated with the individual mandate had rendered the ACA unconstitutional. The media claimed that if they succeeded, it would have eliminated health insurance coverage for up to 23 million Americans. What this biased report does not say is that the Trump plan was to allow people already on the ACA plan to remain on it if they wished, while removing the penalty for those who did not want it and desired to go back into the private healthcare industry and have the doctors of their choice. Trump promised while campaigning to eliminate the national debt in 8 years, but he approved large increases in government spending that Democrats voted for in order to avoid a government shutdown, increase the military, and build the border wall, along with providing the 2017 tax cut. The media reported mostly correctly later that the federal budget deficit increased by almost 50% to nearly $1 trillion in 2019. Under Trump, the U.S. national debt increased by 39%, reaching $27.75 trillion by the end of his term, and the U.S. debt-to-GDP ratio hit a post-World War II high. Trump's argument was that by completing the wall, preventing millions of illegal aliens from draining resources, reducing crime, taking American jobs, and reducing drug and human traffickers would in time pay off. Trump made the claim that Mexico would pay for the wall. Of course, the liberals laughed at that. And as the Democrats scoffed at that statement, they knew that if he completely secured the border, it would doom future Democrat political arguments, which was why they fought him all the way to stop him from completing the border wall. Despite his securing and funding the border wall after the appellate court ruled that he could use Department of Defense money already allocated, as it was in fact in the interest of national defense. In fact, Mexico did pay for a large part of the cost of building the wall. Trump implemented the Remain in Mexico policy for illegals after reminding President Peña Nieto that tariffs could be issued against Mexican imports if he did not comply. This forced the Mexican government to put 30,000 soldiers on their northern border with the U.S. and also secure their southern border with Guatemala, from where most migrants entered Mexico. This process continued under the next president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Immigrants were then forced to file their asylum claims in Mexico to be heard by American immigration judges later if approved, but not on U.S. soil until President Joseph Biden ended Remain in Mexico, stopped the wall construction, despite the materials already being paid for and deposited on location, and then he opened the southern border in violation of federal immigration law, national security, and his oath of office. The liberal media also reported that Trump had failed to deliver the $1 trillion infrastructure spending plan on which he had campaigned. What they did not report was that the Democrats took Congress and they would not act, kept the money from infrastructure to include completing the border wall, wanting to save infrastructure funding for their own party, and many rhinos who were anti-Trump supported the subterfuge. The ultimate shockwave to Democrats was when he appointed and had confirmed Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, 3 conservatives during his presidency, to the U.S. Supreme Court. In Part 2, we will examine Trump's foreign policy, foreign and domestic perceptions, and the continued media attacks on the Trump administration, proving the lies planted by the media and his political opposition, the 2 unconstitutional impeachments, and the January 6th controversy. Thanks for watching today's episode of Forgotten History. If you like this episode, please consider becoming a channel member or joining our Patreon page. This would help us offset the ever-increasing cost of production. As always, please like, share, and comment. And if you have any show ideas, please contact us, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Until next time.